In this video, we're going to go through the data portion of the crystal violet lab. So the first thing it asks us to do is to create a calibration curve. So I have some sample data here, and if you notice, we have some concentration values in micromolar, and we have some absorbance values. Now, there is a value missing from this. We are going to add in, when the concentration is 0, we are going to have 0 absorbance. So that would be our blank that we insert into the spectrophotometer. All right, so let's go ahead and select all of our data. We are going to go to the Insert menu and drop down to Chart. Okay, so we want a scatter plot. So if you don't see this panel on the right side of the screen, if you double click on your graph, it should pop up, and you want to make sure that scatter chart is selected. And the point of inserting this chart and plotting all of these points is we're going to generate a trend line, and from the trend line we can calculate our slope, which will be our molar absorptivity value. So we should have absorbance on the y-axis, concentration on the x-axis. To get our trend line, we are going to go to the Customize menu. We're going to go down to Series. And then if you scroll down, there's an option for trend line. So go ahead and check that box. And then scroll down a little bit further, and we are looking for where it says Label. If you click on that menu, you want to go to Use Equation. And then our equation will pop up on the graph here. Okay, so this equation will give us our molar absorptivity, which is our slope. So this 0.0609, that value right there is our molar absorptivity value. So that value you will need for calculations later on. Now just remember, we are in micromolar here. Okay, so going back to the requirements, so you can take this table, this information right here, and create a data table in your lab document. So you'll need to do that for the first part. And then this graph right here, you can just copy and paste into the lab document. Okay, so that satisfies part 1 of the data. Now part 2 says write the reaction. So if you go to the lab document, you've got your reaction right here. That's the equation that it's asking you to insert. It asks you for a table with time, absorbance, concentration, natural log of the concentration, and 1 over the concentration. Okay, so we've got a lot of work to do here. So you're going to need to create a table in your lab document that has all of this information, but we need to do some calculations here. Okay, so we have some data, sample data that was generated by a spectrophotometer. So the first 2 lines right here, where we had time of 0 and time of 20, there wasn't a cuvette inserted into the spectrophotometer, so those 2 lines are blank right here. So we have our absorbance values, and we have the concentration of crystal violet, which was created automatically based on the wavelength, and the absorbance basically does the calculation for us. Okay, so we don't have any values here for the natural log of crystal violet or 1 over the concentration of crystal violet. So we are going to create these. So if you click on D4 right here, let me zoom in just a little bit. So the first line essentially that has data, we are going to create an equation that will do the calculation for us. So we want to do natural log of the concentration. So to do that, we're going to go up to the formula bar here. We're going to press equals, and then we're going to type ln for natural log, parentheses, and then we're going to click the cell just to the left right here. So that would be C4. So it's going to take the natural log of the concentration. If you hit enter on your keyboard, it will perform the calculation, and then it says right here suggested autofill. So it's basically going to do the same thing all the way down. We want to go ahead and do that, so click the green check mark. Now if for some reason that didn't pop up, if you go to the cell that we just did, let me just go ahead and clear this. You go back to the cell that we were just working in. there should be a blue circle in the lower right-hand corner. If you click on that and drag it down, it will let you fill in all of those boxes with the same equation. So it's basically doing the same equation, but notice it updates. So it's doing it it's grabbing the concentration from the cell immediately to the left and then doing the natural log. And it changes. So notice here it's doing 42, here it's doing 43, so it does it all the way down. So a really neat feature of Google Sheets. All right, now for column E, we want to do 1 over the concentration of crystal violet. So we want to be careful here. We don't want to grab the cell to the left because that is the natural log of the concentration. We want to, again, grab cell C4 for this first line. So I'm going to click the box. I'm going to press equals. And then I want to type 1/ for divided by. And then I'm going to grab cell C4 and hit enter. Again, it's going to suggest my autofill, so I'll click that box. And again, if you need to, click and drag that corner all the way down, but if you click the check mark, it does it for you. Okay, so great. So we've got all of our data here. So I'm going to skip around a little bit here. The next item on part 2's list is a sample Beer's law calculation to get concentration. I'm going to skip that and I'm actually go down and we're going to generate the graphs next. So let's go back to our data and I'm going to zoom out so I can see everything here. Okay, so the first graph is concentration versus time. So I'm going to highlight all of the cells that have concentration right here. Notice I skipped the first 2 lines, and then I'm going to hold down the control button on my keyboard, and that will allow me to also select the time values here. Oh, and let's grab the headings. Okay, so again, I skipped 2 and 3. I'm going to go up to the Insert menu. I'm going to drop down to Chart. Okay, so this went ahead and this created a line chart. That's not what I want. I want a scatter plot. So I am going to, where is scatter plot? Here it is. Perfect. Okay, great. So if you notice, we have a slight curve to our graph right here. And we should have the concentration on the y-axis and time on the x-axis here. Okay, so there's our first chart. So we're going to do the same thing. So it asks us to do a graph of concentration versus time. That's the one that we just did. And then we're going to do natural log versus time. So let's do that one next. So I'm going to just click somewhere to get out of that. And let's highlight our concentration. Natural log of the concentration, rather. All right, and again, I'm holding down the control button, and that allows me to select different columns. And again, I'm skipping these first 2 right here. So same process. I'm going to go Insert, Chart. Oh boy, what happened here? So let's change the chart type. Again, we want to go to a scatter plot. Now, if you notice on mine, it is kind of cutting off some of the data here. If this happens to you, this is a really easy fix. We want to go to the Customize menu. And it should be under the, well, here our vertical axis is a little wonky because we have all this space at the bottom. So I'm going to expand vertical axis. And minimum value, so our vertical axis is the natural log of the concentration. So if you notice, our greatest value is like 2.49. So let's make our maximum value 2.6. And then if you scroll down, the minimum value, the lowest value is 1.38. So how about 1.2? Oops. Okay, great. That looks a lot better. So we're getting the entire thing on our graph. The first one looked okay. You can tweak it if you'd like to, but the first one looked okay. Great. So this one looks a lot straighter. And the last graph that we want to generate is 1 over the concentration versus time. Okay, so again, I'm going to highlight my data, making sure to grab the heading. And I'm going to hold down Control, and I'm going to grab all of the time values and highlight that heading. So again, insert, chart. Oh, third time's a charm. It actually gave us the right chart type here. Okay, great. So scatter chart and everything looks good. All right. So let me just zoom out just a little bit. So we have 3 different graphs here. And if you recall, for rate laws, we are looking at the straightness of the graph, and that will help us determine the reaction order. So to do that, we are going to use the R value. And to create this, or to generate the R value, we need to insert a trend line. So I skip that process each time. We're going to do it all at the same time here. So again, to get the menu, you double click on the graph. On the right side, you want to go to the Customize menu, find Series, expand that, scroll down, and you want trend line. And let's go ahead and click Use Equation so we can see our trend line equation. And then we're also going to click this button where it says Show R squared. Okay, so we have an R squared value up here. I'm going to do the same thing on our other graphs. So I'm going to insert a trend line. I'm going to show the equation and the R squared value. And one last. Trend line. Use equation, R squared. Okay, great. So we've got all that on there. Now, the R squared value essentially tells you how straight your line is. So the closer you are to 1, the straighter your line is. So for example, looking at our natural log versus time, our R squared value is 1. This one here has a slight curve to it, so our R squared value is 0.97. So not perfectly straight. It's close. And here, this one's a little bit straighter. Our R squared value is 0.984. So again, the R squared value tells you how straight your graph is, the closer it is to 1. So with this information right here, you now need to choose the correct graph. So there are 2 remaining items on our list that I am going to ask you to do on your own. And the first one is the sample Beer's Law calculation to get concentration. And I'm going to give you a hint though on this one. So if you go back to your calibration curve, as I said, our 0.0609 is our slope. That's our molar absorptivity value. And you need to show a Beer's Law calculation to get your concentration. So if you recall, Beer's Law is absorbance equals molar absorptivity, path length, concentration. So you're solving for concentration, and if you recall, L is our path length, which is always 1 centimeter for our cuvettes. So you need to show me a calculation where you get concentration, which is C. And an easy way to do this would be to go back to your data here. So you have some concentration values here. You have some absorbance values here. So if you wanted to show me a calculation and also be able to check your answer, I would look at those values right here. But you need to show me the whole thing worked out. And the last thing is write the rate law. Make sure to include K with the correct units. Okay, so the hint that I'll give you on this step here is, go back to your graphs. One of these is correct. So if you go back and look at your notes, we have some examples where we wrote out the rate law based on the graph. So go back and look at that. So you're only doing part 1 of the, you're only doing the data portion of the Crystal Violet Lab today. Okay, so feel free to reach out if you guys have questions, but that should hopefully get you through the first part of the day, the lab.